Hi everyone, Simo here again with the next instalment of the in-depth build of the giant Convair B-36 Peacemaker from Fiddlers Green. In this episode I concentrate on the engines, 6 turn-in and 4 burn-in as it was known, or by those who actually flew in the aircraft, 2 turn-in, 2 burn-in, 2 smoke-in, 2 choke-in and 2 more unaccounted for. I don't think I'd like to have been on that flight. Anyway, let's start with the 6 radial engines. First, I'll make the propellers. So here we are with the blanks, simple matter of cutting them out. You may notice I have 2 extra here, just in case. I've printed the props out separately on 160 gram paper, and later on I'll paint them with some satin varnish. If I paste the front and back of the propeller together, it will look a little flat, so what I will do is put a little sliver of foam rubber in between them just to give them a little bit of depth. The spinner is a simple cone shape. The prop is set into the spinner, so what I need to do is punch 3 small holes that the prop blades will go into. Bit of tissue paper into the spinner and the prop glues to that. prop blades are very delicate at this stage, but a touch of super glue will soon toughen them up. There's a big seam along the side of the spinner, so I use some putty just to fill it, and that will get rid of it. One of my favourite parts: black for the blades and some yellow for the blade tips, and of course a spinner. Okay, that's one done. So what do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there we go. The engine pods are made up of 4 pieces. There's the lower pod, there's the upper pod made of 2 pieces, and there's a strip which makes it into a ring which holds the upper and the lower pod together. So it's like a clamshell. Here are the details provided on the plan. So I'll do the lower part of the pod first. So that's the lower parts of the pod completed, and now on to the upper parts. So this ring holds the two halves of the clamshell together, and then the shell is wrapped around the trailing edge of the wing. Some people have said they've had some difficulty in getting the pod to form the correct shape around the wing, but I'm sure if I go slowly and try not to get frustrated, it should be okay. We'll see. Now, what types of glue do I use? Three mainly. I use normal PVA glue for normal circumstance, and of course you can also water it down if you need to, and it's also good for softening the paper so that it forms into a curve or pushes into a crease. I also use high tack glue, which looks a little like PVA but tends to stick at a much faster rate. And more I find I'm using quite a lot of super glue where I want it to go off almost immediately. And of course I can also use super glue to harden the paper, as I did with the prop blades. So there we go, the magic of video editing has given me all the pods ready to wrap around the wing. So the upper part of the pod went on reasonably easily, the lower part not so much. It wasn't quite the right shape, and I had to do a little bit of cutting just to get the pod to fit correctly. Now, because I'm a little bit ham-fisted, I caused some dents to form in the pod, so it was easy enough just to put a stick in just to get rid of the dent. And to stop that occurring in the future, I'm going to stuff the pods with tissue paper, and that'll give it some form and strength. The outer pod looks okay, but the two inner pods, where I've cut them, there's some gaps, so they will need to be filled. Before I go any further, I'm going to stuff the pods with tissue just to stop those dents occurring. Now, of course, the pods should all be pointing in the same direction, but because I wasn't as careful as I could have been, they're not. One pod is pointing to the left, one pod is pointing to the right. The third pod is parallel with the wing, which is great. I'll leave that one alone. It means I'm going to have to do a little bit of surgery on the ends of the pod just to align them up correctly. This is a dry run of putting the prop on the wing. I'm not going to do this until right at the end because, as you can guess, if I put all the props on, I'll damage them. So it's best to get everything done before I do that. Now, some horrible gaps between the pod and the wing, unfortunately so. What I'm going to have to do is just cut some silver strip and use that as a fillet to get rid of that gap. Obviously this isn't how it looks in real life, but it looks much better doing this than leaving the horrible gaps. And I'm using the PVA here to soften the fillet and push it into the crease. I had to cut a hole in the inboard pod to accommodate the undercarriage leg, and it looked a little bit rough, so I just made a rectangular piece of silver paper just to put over the top to make it look tidier. So it was a lot of work, but it's done. This is the pod before I put the fillet on. You can see those nasty gaps, and then it looks much better with the fillet in place. With the air intakes, you can see the tissue stuffing, so what I'm doing here is just pushing some black paper in there just to hide it. So, onto the jet engines. Here are the parts. You have the two pylons, which they call cabines. No, I've not heard of that word either. I'm just going to call them pylons. You have the lower fairings, the four jet engines themselves, and the cowling rings. They double up on the cowling rings. They must be expecting problems. Here are the instructions provided. It looks simple enough. Let's get on and cut them out. The leading edge of the pylon isn't creased and is rolled around a tube just to form a rounded edge. there's one thing missing in the kit, and that's the engine intake is just a hole. There should be a conical ring inside, so I'm just going to make my own out of a silver paper cone, and I'll push it in there, and it should also help with the strength. So here are the parts and one finished intake cone. I glue the open tabs to the front of the cone, and they look great as the intake louvre doors, which when the engine is shut down, it stops the ingress of dirt and birds building nests in there or whatever. Fitting the cowley is a little bit tricky, but you start in the middle and just glue a little bit at a time, just pushing it down to form around the jet engines. So that's one pod done. It's not as rounded and aerodynamic as the real engine, but it's not bad. It's not a bad representation. There's a bit of a nasty lip where the cowling meets the engine, so I'm just going to cut that off and sand it and paint it yellow, and it should be okay. one pod done. We of course need another one. These jet engines were added at a later stage in the development of the B-36 when they realised they needed more power for higher bomb loads. When the aircraft was airborne, the jet engines were shut down and it just relied on piston power. They were also supposed to be used, thankfully it never was used, they were also used to increase the speed of the aircraft as it went over the bomb area. The engine pylon is superglued to a slot cut in the wing. There's also a slot cut for a strut which holds onto the jet engine. And for the strut I'm just going to use a piece of a wood coffee stirrer. I find this strut very strange. It looks very ill-designed, almost sort of Heath Robinson-ish. And of course, if you're not as old as me, you probably don't know who Heath Robinson is. I'd encourage you to Google him, he's quite fascinating. There's the inevitable gap between the pylon and the wing, so I'm going to have to correct that with a fillet. So that's all the engines completed, 6 turning, 4 burning. Thanks for getting to the end of this video with me. In the next and last part of this series on the B-36, I tackle the undercarriage and all those final details. So with that, I will see you very soon. Bye bye.